All right, friends, welcome. It is week 2, day 2. So we are cruising along with learning all of this material. We have learned a ton of stuff, right? We've learned all about HTML, all about CSS. Yesterday, we did an intro to JavaScript. And so now we are kind of really talking about JavaScript and getting a full picture of what our web page needs in order for us to fully build out a functioning and working web page. Before we get started, as always, we have a couple things of housekeeping. Discussion questions are due Sunday, and core assignments are due Sunday. So again, you have 3 core assignments. You have 2 discussion questions. Those are due Sunday. Always, you can look at our class calendar, and this will show you your core assignments in this assignment checklist. They are also here linked. So at the bottom here, you can see, like profile page, button clicker, likes. So you'll have all that information for you. So that is always there. If you ever have questions, always revert back to this class calendar. It's also available on your platform as well. Belt exam. We talked pretty extensively about the belt exam yesterday. I did want to open it up for just 1 or 2 minutes or 5 minutes if needed, of belt exam questions. If there's anything people are worried about, if you're wanting to know what's going to be on it. Obviously we talked in depth about it yesterday. So if you haven't watched that, I ask that you go watch that and then you can bring your next question to tomorrow. But are there any questions about the belt exam if you have already watched the video yesterday or you were in class? Okay. Just a reminder, in order for you to get a belt exam, you have to have 90% of core assignments completed. Yeah, so it is, yeah, Vega, I'm looking at the chat right now. Core by Friday to get the belt code. Yeah, so it'll be by Friday. Remember, I will check in the morning and then I'll check at noon. If at noon, like I'll send out the code, I'll kind of do a first wave and then I'll do a second wave. If by noon you don't have them, but you finish them after, please email me and let me know, and then I can send you your code. Just as a reminder, I kind of log off at 5 o'clock. And so you have to kind of do that before then because my wife made plans for us. So I won't even be home anyway. Darius asked, all 6 or just 3? You've got to have at least 5. So 90% of the core assignments. So at least 5. We're gonna but here's what I would say. Before you take the exam, I would encourage you to have all 6 done. Like, I really think that even if unless you did profile page and button clicker, likes is a good one, but don't do 5 in regards of you've done button clicker and you've done likes, but you haven't finished profile page. Profile page is going to be very similar and it is a pain. But you need it really for the exam. If you can't do profile page, you're really going to struggle with the exam. And so please make sure that I would really encourage, get 5 in, get your code, and then finish your 6th one and then start the exam. That's my encouragement to you. Great. Just as a reminder, you will. Yeah, go ahead.
Question. I know yesterday you said that with TA assistance and any assistance with the exam being open, you will not be allowed to get that. So would you recommend that we make sure we get all assistance before even touching the exam so that we won't have no problems with that, right?
Yeah.
So like if we practice our practice questions and then get help with that before we open the exam. So if it is on the exam, we'll be okay.
Yeah, exactly. So TAs have the ability, and we at Coding Dojo have the ability to see when you started an exam and that you have an open exam. And so what they will do is, if you come and get help, their first thing is they're going to look you up and see, do you have an exam currently open? And if you do, they're going to say, hey, unfortunately, I'm sorry, I can't help you. Even if it's like, but it's on profile page. If you have an exam, they can't help you until that's closed. Because yeah, just that doesn't, because maybe there's a similarity in profile page. You're like, if I can do that, then I can transfer it over. So if it's open and they can see it, and they can see that it's open, then unfortunately they're going to say, I can't do anything until this is closed. Now, if you close an exam, you can't reopen it even within the time, right? So you've got to, so once it's closed, it's closed. Once you submit, you submit. One thing I didn't tell you is when you do submit your exam, my encouragement to you, and I've had this happen a few times just because technology sometimes doesn't work the way it works. Amazon didn't work for me yesterday the way it was supposed to because it's Prime Day, right? Like just technology happens. I would definitely take a screenshot of your submission. So when you submit the exam, take a screenshot, and that way you have a timestamp on that, and then send me an email or send myself and Christina an email that just is, hey, I finished my exam. Or if you have if it's, if your screen shows the time, then that's fine. You don't have to send me an email. As long as I've got a timestamp that you have submitted this, because I can go in and retroactively see when you opened it. If you have a timestamp of, hey, here's when it closed, but there's some weird issue, then I still have that. So make sure you do take a screenshot. Just, this is for yourself. I've had it to where students completed it, looked fine, and then I come and I'm like, hey, you never turned in an exam. And they're like, what do you mean? I turned it in. Like, and then they thankfully have had a screenshot because I've told them. And I was like, okay, great. I can accept that. Send me your exam, all of that. So yeah. Oh yeah, they got to change your computer time. There you go. But that's a rare thing. If 12 of you guys all have an issue, then it's like, well, hold on. But if you do have any issues as well, that's really where the timestamp comes in, is like you're trying to submit it and it's just not submitting. That's when you need to send me an email immediately and say, hey, I'm trying to do this. Doesn't matter what time it is. Even if it's on the weekend, right? Like it doesn't matter, because, hey, I'm trying to submit this. Here's the error that I'm getting, and with a screenshot of it. And then you need to do that immediately. If you wait 3 days and tell me that, then there's no way that I can verify that it didn't work when the exam was open. So definitely do it, kind of one of those, even if you're tired and you're like, I'll just do it tomorrow. Don't just do it at that moment. Take a screenshot. This isn't working, of why it's not working, or video of you trying to, if there's no screenshot to tell any information, screen record yourself trying to upload your video, like show your code. You don't have to walk through it, but like, hey, here's a full file. Here's all my, like this, have it open. I have some index. I've got a main. I've got a style that obviously it would have to have code, and then showing yourself trying to submit it. And if that doesn't work, that's a great way that I can say, I will always go to bat for you guys and try to like help you. And it just gives me more arsenal in case I have to go to my boss and they're like, why is this being let in? Or why are you manually changing it? I'm like, look, this was the issue. They sent me a video. We're good. It just helps me advocate on your end. So please just make sure. And then once you get your belt exam, you can just delete the video or code or whatever. If you took a screenshot and everything worked fine, you can just delete it after. So that's my encouragement for the yellow belt. Any other questions? These are great questions, guys. Okay. Today we've got a fun one. We are talking all about JavaScript. We are going to learn and dive into JavaScript. Now, we talked about JavaScript yesterday. And if we see on our class, we had our JavaScript review. We did the Flex Your Blocks assignment yesterday. So if you are struggling with kind of display flex or handling that, or with profile page, that can be helpful. We did also in this one go through profile page to an extent. So we kind of helped. We had a team effort. It was awesome for, maybe 30 minutes trying to fix a profile page. We learned about kind of formatting can play a big deal. So that office hour was recorded, and I will make sure that I post that as well. But yesterday we talked about just a review, right? We talked about what is a variable. We talked about data types. We talked about single equal sign versus double equal sign versus, et cetera, et cetera. Now, today we're going to talk about, and we talked about functions as well. And so now we're actually going to dive into how does JavaScript work in the browser, because everything we've done so far is just JavaScript in a file, right? And it still sort of acts that way. We still are going to have a main.js file. But before we sort of talk about JavaScript in the browser, there's one thing I want to do is, well, I guess we'll get to DOM here in a second. So let's jump into JavaScript in the browser and then I'll show you. So here we have our JavaScript file, right? Now, if I say console.log, hello world, right? This is in this folder. And if I've got this open, cool. I see hello world here. This is not my console. Please know that my index, that's just serendipitous, that my index.html has hello world. But if I right click and I inspect, I have my console here and there's nothing, right? It's not showing anything. So what I have to do is actually have to connect in the same way that I connect my CSS file to my HTML. I also have to connect my JS file to my HTML. Now there's two ways that you can do this. The first one is you can put it up here in your head and you just say script. If I could type correctly, script. And this is going to be we have a source that is going to be main.js. Cool. And I don't need anything in here. Now the other way, and this will connect, right? So if I have this and I console log hello world, now if I refresh this, I get hello world. I have officially gotten the last piece of my web page together. I have connected my web page or my JS script, my JavaScript script, to my index.html. Now I can do it up here in my head, or I could do it here at the very bottom of my body. Does anybody know why this is a way that people like? Does anybody know the difference, or what? Maybe anybody have theories of why you might do one over the other? Any thoughts?
So it can read the JavaScript at the end, towards the
Yeah,
end of everything else.
exactly, Lucas. Not always, but sometimes in our JavaScript files, we refer to elements, and we're going to see how we can kind of refer to elements today. We refer to elements within our index.html. But in the same way that if I was in JavaScript and I said, console, or I said, let x equal 7, but up here I said console.log x, it doesn't know what x is yet, right? I haven't declared that. It goes top to bottom, and it's going to get here and it's going to say, hey, I don't know what x is because it hasn't been declared yet. If I've got it, if I've got my script file at my top here, and I'm referring back to some HTML, it doesn't know that, right? So it doesn't know what that is. That's one issue. The second issue is if you've got a heavy JavaScript file, maybe you've got a lot going on. Even if it's a very, very, very minor slowdown, if you're loading everything in your JavaScript file before you load in your HTML, then sometimes that can create a user experience that even if it's for a second and your HTML takes a long time to load, your user is going to see that and say, wow, this is kind of a slow website, right? Even if it's just minute, even if it's something very, very, very small, it can still change the user experience. And so a lot of developers will put that actually at the bottom in the body. Now there is a cool thing you can do. I personally like to kind of keep it up here in my metadata, right? Just kind of helps me keep track a little bit easier. Like, okay, I got my CSS, got my script. If I wanted to, if I want to do it at the top, I can put in this keyword of defer. Now what this will do is it says, hey, I've got a HTML file will read. Okay, we've got a JavaScript file, but don't read it until you've read all of the HTML. So let's go ahead and get all the good stuff out first so my user has a quick experience. And then even if this takes 1 second to load, the idea that my user is going to load something and then expect something else within 1 second is not very high, right? So if we use this defer, it acts the same way as if we just put it at the bottom. It's going to wait till all of our HTML is loaded, and then it is going to And then it is going to load and read our JS file. Are there any questions on sort of how we can link the main JS and our HTML?
So your preference is we put the script on top, right?
It is up to you. It really is developer preference. If you're going to put it on top, just make sure you have this defer keyword.
Defer, okay.
If you want to put it at the bottom, you can do that as well. That's okay. Both will work exactly fine, exactly the same.
Okay.
When it comes to linking, it'll be linking kind of like the CSS, right?
Sort of, right? You just link it. You just say script is your keyword instead of link. You say script, and then you give it the source. So wherever your script lies, again, same sort of thing that if you've got like a JS folder, you'd have to say JS/main.js, and then that's it.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, and then our CSS uses href. I see that in chat as well. Our CSS uses href, whereas we use source. So, yeah, cool. Okay, so I want to do something. I want to console.log document. Okay. So now that we are able to deal and connect our JS, I want to talk about something called the DOM. Does anybody know what DOM stands for? Domain? That's close. Or that's a good thought. Yeah, exactly. It is. Yeah, dominant. That does. I'm sure all of those, right? It's short for all of those. But Roberto's right. It is document object model. And so there's this idea, or not this idea, but this is sort of how everything works, right? The DOM acts as a blueprint for all of our HTML elements and everything attached to it. So we have this keyword of document, and this is really just a blueprint, right? A blueprint of all of our HTML, and it does it in a tree-like way. So here you've kind of got this, and you've got a branch of head, and the head's got a branch of title, and the title's got a my title, or you have this branch of body, and then it's got an H1 and an A tag. And you can see a parent-child relationship idea. Well, when we are dealing with the DOM, it is our blueprint. So if I want to look at where does X go, or where in this area, what does this say? I can do that in my document, right? This document is my blueprint. So if I console log document, I like just to show, so you can console log document, and this is the actual document that we get, right? So it is my HTML file, right? It is the blueprint. Document is just our blueprint where I can go in and I can see all of this. And so everything we do lives on the DOM. When you get to React, you're going to see how, or if you go to React or the MERN stack, you'll see how we can manipulate this in an efficient way called a single page application. But for right now, anything we're doing, we can manipulate and change aspects on this tree, right? On this actual layout of my HTML. So that's the DOM. And we're going to see how we can target specific elements within our DOM, how we can change specific things, and get specific information. Yeah, Vega, it's the family tree, right? You can think about it that this HTML document is just a document that has all of our HTML code. And that is what we call our DOM. Now, you can get really lost in like understanding the DOM. You don't need to. You just have to understand that it's a blueprint of how our HTML page is laid out. And that blueprint tells us where certain things are, right? Where this room is. If you think about an architect and they have this blueprint, they can go. And if you want to change an aspect of your house, you would go, you'd look at the blueprints and say, okay, where's the supporting beam? Where is X, Y, or Z? And then I can alter and change that. Same sort of thing. Okay. Cool. So we've talked about JavaScript in the browser. We've attached a script file. We've talked about the DOM. So now we need to talk about JavaScript events. So JavaScript events is something we can do. And here's a great kind of area to start with your kind of dealing with JavaScript. Really start here on this kind of click, and we're going to go through it a little bit. I've already linked our script. We're good to go. But what we can do is we can create some events that happen in our JavaScript. And all an event is we are looking at saying, has anything happened? Has anything changed? So there's this thing within our DOM called an event listener, right? And so it's constantly listening or seeing, what do I need to do? What do I need to change? Does anything need to change? Remember, HTML is my sort of layout of my house. My CSS is what it looks like. And my JavaScript is what does it do, right? So I can have what we call events that allow us to have some functionality. So let's say that we had, I'm just going to kind of get rid of this. Let's say that we had, I'm just going to create a .main. Within this, it's going to have a button, BTN. So it's a button with a class of BTN that says, click me. Cool. Cool. So I've got this button that says click me, right? And if I look at my code, cool, from a JavaScript, click me. But if I click, it doesn't do anything. Well, there's a whole bunch of things that we can do within our HTML that create what we call a listener. And one of them that is very, very, very popular is what we call an on. And you can see that I have on change, on blur, on all these things, but one of them is on click. And so what this is saying is, hey, when this specific element is clicked, well, what do I want to do? We're going to start with just a built-in function. I made the first roll. First error. Oops. We're going to start with a built-in function called alert. And one thing, and you guys just watched it, is when you're dealing with on clicks, if you use double quotes, then on the inside, you need to use single quotes. Right? Because you guys just saw when I used a double quote here, it thought that that was it, right? That was the end of this information. Vice versa, if you started with single quotes, use double quotes on the inside. Cool. Now this alert, you can see that's a different color. That's because it's a built-in function, right? That it kind of comes out of the box from JavaScript. And what it will do is something that you guys are probably very familiar with. If I come, I'm saved, I'm good to go. I refresh this, and now if I click it, I get an alert that says this button was click. Ooh, I didn't spell clicked. How embarrassing. I'm a terrible speller, just so you guys know. Refresh it. Now this button is clicked. So I listened for an event, and when that happened, when that button was clicked, I said, this is what I want you to do. I'm going to pause there. Are there any questions on what we just did?
I have a quick question. So, why you did you create the function in the JavaScript session, like in the main.js session? Did you
Nope.
create?
Nope. Alert is a built-in function.
Okay,
It comes out of the box.
okay,
In the same way that kind of on click is there, right?
yeah,
Or when we're dealing with arrays, we have like length. Alert is a out of the box, same,
okay.
same sort of thing.
Well, I didn't know that, so thank you.
Yeah, of course. Okay. Same thing like console log, right? We didn't do anything for console log. It's there, it's available. Alert is one of those. Cool. But I like where your head's at, where maybe I don't want, this is called like inline, like doing JavaScript inline, which is fine. But if it gets a little bit more, just a little bit more advanced, you're not really going to want that, right? And we have this sweet main.js file, so let's actually utilize that.
Well, quick question.
Yeah.
How many alerts, how many alert function you can create in your HTML?
You could have on click, you could have it on every element.
Okay.
Every element could be when you're clicked or hovered or anything. So
Okay.
yeah, you can use alert whenever you want.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, of course. Okay. So we're going to get rid of alert now. We just learned it. We loved it. We've used it. We don't need it anymore. Let's come here and let's actually create our own function that does the same thing. So we're going to say function alert me. We'll call it that. Doesn't take anything, but we're going to alert and we're going to say hello world. So we still are using this alert, right? And we have this function alert me. And when it's called and or what's the word? What's the other word? When it's called, what is it? Starts with an I. Anybody remember? When it's invoked. Yeah, exactly. When it's invoked, then it's going to run this code. And so what we can do is, because this script is here and we've connected the two, it has access to all of these functions. So now I could just say alert me, and then I do my parentheses. And now when this button is clicked, it'll go to my JS and it'll run this function. So I come here, I refresh, click, we get hello world. So I am officially clicking on a button in my HTML. It's going to my JS file and running that code. Whoa. Kind of a sweet thing. I don't know if you guys are as impressed as I am, because I think this is sweet.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. Good. I see a lot of people do this, and I think it's a-okay. At the very top, they'll just do like running main.js, just so whenever you're spinning up, you make sure everything's working. And I think when you're first starting, I think that's okay. You're like, okay, as long as I got this, I know that we're working. Cool. And if your code doesn't work, then you're like, I know my file's running, so something in my code, not my file thing. Okay. Any questions on what we just did? I'm going to pause there for a second, because then we're going to get a little bit more advanced. No questions? You guys are all crushing it? Okay, cool. I love that. Now in our JavaScript, we can do anything, right? If we wanted to console log, that's a-okay. If we wanted to, kind of do anything, that works just fine. But one thing to notice is right now, I don't have anything. I'm not passing in anything, right? I don't have any parameters. I'm not passing in anything. When we start talking about manipulating the DOM, we want to manipulate these elements, right? We want to manipulate specific things. So let's create another button. So I'm going to call this counting. And this is going to be a p tag with like, let's count. And then let's do a button. And this is going to go say 23. Cool. What I want to do is whenever I click this button, I want this information. I want this to increase by 1. Whenever I click this, think about it like a like on Facebook. Whenever I click this, I want this to increase by 1. So we know that, okay, on click, I can do something, right? We already know that we have that functionality. So let's build that out. Say, okay, on click. Now, what do we want to do? We want to make it increase, like increase number. So I'm going to say increase num is my function. Now note, I don't have a function called increase num. So I'm going to say function. Increase num. And I'm gonna get away here for a second. How I get this element is by using a keyword called this. And it is so frustrating and challenging sometimes because you are like, why is this working the way that it is? But in JavaScript, what I can do is I can use a keyword called this. In the same way that function's a keyword, in the same way that document's a keyword, this is a keyword. And what it does is it, num. Okay. Is it passes in the entire element to my function. So here, I'm going to say num. Now, sometimes, so a couple things here. When I'm dealing with this on my HTML side, I need to call it this. When I'm dealing with it in my JS side, I don't want to call it this because remember, this is a keyword. So in my HTML side, I pass in this. On this side, I need to call it something different. Num makes sense. You call it unicorn or cupcake if you want it. Doesn't matter. Okay. So right now, all we're doing is we're console logging this. So that way we can see what it does. So it's all saved. Let's come here. I refresh. Let's count. I click it. And you can see that it gives me this, or it gives me an element. I'm going to try to not use the word this. It gives me the entire element, right? The element that was clicked, this was given to me. And that's a big deal, right? Because now what I can do is I can do a couple different things, right? I have the entire element and I can even break it down because it's within a document, right? I can break it down and do different things. If I, and there's quite a few different sort of things we can do, but let's say console.log num dot inner text. Now what this will do is it has this inner text as a built-in method that just grabs the text of my actual element. So here, if I refresh, click this, we get the entire element because of this, and that's what we're console logging, right? And then we also get the text inside of there, which is just the number 23. And now that I have that information, I can also alter some information. So I could say num dot inner text equals. Now I'm just gonna come here because you guys could already see it. If I were to look at the type of that, what we're trying to do is we're trying to increase this number, right? But we know that different things or different types, whether it's a string or a Boolean or a number, have different methods and functionality that they can do. So I can say type of num. Let's just do that. Num.innerText. And that's going to give me what data type is it? And so in this case, we'll see. Let's comment this out first. Oops. If I refresh and click, we get an undefined. Oh. Because I missed this. Thank you, Reba. Thank you, Lucas. Crushed it. That's exactly why I had it lowercase. And alas, it showed undefined because it's saying, I don't know what that is. Okay, let's refresh this. Perfect. So we get the entire element that comes from the word this, right? We're saying, okay, give the function increase num, this entire thing. We get 23, which is the inner text, and it's of type string. So if I'm wanting to increase this number, what I have to do is I actually have to do what we call a type conversion, right? To where now, if I want it to become a number, I can use this parse int function that's built in JavaScript. And what it does is it converts a string into a number. Now, if I had a string of hello world, it's going to give me an error because it's going to say I can't do that. But when we have like 23, it can do that. And so what I can, knowing that information, is I can reset that value. And this is what we call manipulating the DOM. I can reset the value of the inner text, which is this. I say, no, now it's equal to the number version of the inner text. So the number 23 plus 1. Because, right, this allows me to, I can do this because it is a number. So now that that's working, I should be able to refresh, click this. Now we get the number 24. I click it again, 25, 26, 27, and so on and so forth. I'm now manipulating the DOM. I am changing values. Now, I'll refresh this. It all goes away, right? It all goes back to its original. We refresh the original page. We're not going to worry about like keeping data right now and like always wanting that to be persistent. Not for this course, doesn't matter. But for right now, we are able to manipulate the DOM. Yeah, so it is a parse int converts a string into a number. Okay, I'm going to stop there. We talked about the word this. We manipulated the DOM. Any questions?
Yes.
Yeah. All right, hit me with it.
Okay. So what about if you have to click on something else for the number to increase? Like you have
Oh,
like
that's
Right.
the end. End of class is what you're talking about. If I wanted like this to be 23 and I click on this button, like I click on the button and then something else changes.
Yes, you click on something else and the number increases. Like you
Yeah.
have like 23 or something like that.
Yeah. So that'll, that's what we're going to go in at the end. So I love where your
Okay.
head's at. That's what we're going to build to. Cool. Any other questions that I can help you? Kari, I use AI. That's how I get suggested JS. So again, I would suggest you guys don't. I just do it because it's easier because I always mess up typing. It helps me teach faster. But it's a paid subscription thing. Nothing free, unfortunately. Okay. So I guess, can you guys put some ones in the chat if you're staying with me? Can you put some zeros if you're not? This is probably okay. If you're at a 0, do you mind kind of just putting what are some things that are not clicking? I do see it while you're typing that. I see this refers to an object only. It refers to the element that was clicked on. Now, please note that this, if I were to say, I mean, alert me is a terrible name, but if I called it like word, or sorry, we'll call it element. Cool. I can have this, and these mean different things. In regards of this top one on line 13 refers to this specific element. not any other button, just this specific element. When it reads this, it only refers to this element. So if I were to save this, refresh, cool. So when I click on this, I'll get the word click me here, and this allows me to go up because I get this one right here. So this keyword means the element where it's being called. And that's super important. The element where it's being called, when you're referring to this, it's just going to grab specifically that element. But these are the same keyword. They're doing the same thing. They're just grabbing the element to which it's being called here. Yes, that is correct. It is the same specific element to what it's called on. You can see that these are even different, right? We've named this one element. We've named this num. They both have this. And these cannot be, this cannot be like unicorn or cupcake or anything like that. This has to be the keyword of this. On this side, on my JS side, this could be unicorn and cupcake. It doesn't matter. And somebody said unicorn. Like, why unicorns? Because I just think it's outrageous. So just to show you that it can be anything you want it to be, dream. Somebody said this is like a class. Not necessarily. They're doing different things. This just allows you to refer to the specific element and allows you to differentiate. And really what it's doing is it's saying, okay, on my big tree, right, there is a click event that happened. Where on my big tree did that happen? Was it here or here or here? And so it's like, oh no, here is where this event happened. Cool. So now I'm just referring to that. And so this kind of acts as a roadmap for our DOM to say, where did the event occur? What happened? Cool.
So then, quick question, sorry.
Yeah, of course.
So then this, when you're comparing your HTML to your JavaScript, the one click equals when it says that alert me, that's connecting it to the alert me function, correct? So the function that you're calling in the JavaScript has to equal that one click equal reference in the HTML?
The on click.
Yes.
Yeah. So this name has to reference this function. If this
And
was,
that's how they know.
yes, if it was like alert min and I called alert me, it's not going to work because it's going to say, yeah, I don't know what this is. So if we come here, we should get a click me, right? But because we called it something different, uncaught alert me is not defined. And it's like, oh, my function is actually called alert min, right?
Okay.
It's coming in here and saying, hey, you're trying to run a function that does not exist within your JS file.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So somebody said not a class, but this can be used in class as well. Just it has more properties. I guess it depends on what you mean by used in class. We're really just going to use this for our HTML is where you kind of just need to focus. So a class will be more, I think we're gonna learn about that like maybe week 4. Class is gonna be more for a blueprint for like JavaScript if you're wanting to replicate or do something like that. This is just kind of focusing for the DOM, which element created the alert, which element created the event. And so that's the real way to focus on it is the DOM gets an event and it's saying, hey, who asked for, who asked? Because what's going to happen is the DOM's going to come here and it's going to say, cool, I need to console log the element, right? Because that's what we're doing. This entire element, which one called that? So that way I can console log the right thing. And we say this one, right? That's way that keyword is like, it's this specific one is that was clicked on that we can then console log it. Right. need to change that. Okay. Now, the last thing we need to do is we need to, and I love the way you're thinking I can't remember who said it, but what if I wanted this to be my value and this to be click to increase value above. And let's just do click to increase. That's too much. Okay. Now, there's yeah, it was Dave. Thanks, Dave. There's a couple ways we can do this. And on the platform, we can see different things where we're dealing with our document object model. And there's this portion called query selector. Now, I'm going to show you two ways to do it. I'm going to show you one way, which is maybe a little bit more challenging. And I'm going to show you the easier way. And I'm going to tell you why I think, which is which. And then we can kind of go from there. So within our document, if we were to go back to this, and we were just going to console log document. Oops. We've got some functionality that we have access to. So console log document. We have some functionality because we have this document, right? We have everything at our fingertips and we can identify and see different things within it, right? I can identify different ways or different elements, not only by this keyword, but what's another way? Think about from CSS. What's another way we can kind of put something on an element that helps us identify it? There's two kind of ways we can do it.
Classes and IDs.
Exactly. Classes and IDs, right? So what I could do is I could give this a class of, we'll call it counting. Perfect. And then what I can do is I can just say console log document dot, and this is a built-in method, get element, oops, get elements, sorry, by class name. Now I can do a lot of things, right? With my gets, I can do a whole bunch of by ID, by class names, by name, by tag name. There's a whole bunch of stuff I can do, but I'm going to get elements. Now notice this is plural by class name. Now, what I then need to do in order to do that is give it the class name I'm wanting. So I'm going to say counting. Perfect. And then let's see what happens here. If I refresh, I got a div of counting, right? That is, there's one in there. And you can see that there's a couple different things, right? There's a P tag that's got some information in there, but it allows me really to get an element by a class name. Now, because this is a class name, it's going to, and the reason it has elements, not element, is because remember, we can have multiple elements with the same class. Now, when we had a get element by ID, it's because you should only have one element with one ID name, right? That ID should only be attached to one element. So you don't want to get anything else. And so what I can do here, so I can change this, is I can actually, this gives me a array of all of the elements that have the class of counting. So we saw that there was one in there. So if I wanted just that specific one, I could say this, 0, right? The first one in the array. So if I come here and I refresh, cool. I've got just specifically the div called counting. Ooh, I put it on div. That's probably what. Oh, counting num. That's where the confusion came. I want specifically this one, not the div. Sorry about that. So let's go in here and we'll say counting num. But if you saw that it still got me the first one, if I would have said, actually, let's just go back. No, let's do them. If I would have said 1, it would have given me this one, right? It was the second one. It starts from the top and then goes to the bottom. So now we have counting num, and I can target specifically this p tag. So come here, and refresh, and I just get this p tag. Now I can still do the same thing. Now let's say I wanted to refer back to that. So I can say let num number equal this. Now I have access to it. And any function, if I want to call number, it is globally scoped, meaning that I can call it wherever I want. So let's call this function increase num2. Yeah, we'll do that. We'll call it increase num2. Where what I'm going to do is I have that value here. And so what I want to do is I want to say number dot enter text, which is going to be this guy, equals parse int enter text +1. Something we've already done, right? We've already done that here. And so all this is doing is this is saying, hey, you know that number that we've already gotten, which is just that p tag, its inner text now needs to be changed to that inner text +1. And if I come here and just say 2, I no longer need this keyword because I'm not doing anything to the button, right? I'm changing a totally different element. And so now what I can do is if I save both, I'm going to save this. Now refresh. I'm now changing a totally different element. Again, that's because I use the get elements by class name. I gave the class name and I gave the position at what I wanted. Now that's option 1. So I'll put option 1. This, oops, is option 2. Where I'm going to do the same thing, but instead of having to deal with an array of class elements that's gotten back, I just use one called query selector. Let's just comment this out. Query selector is another tool you can use. You can do elements by class name, by element by ID, or query selector. And it is a general general selector of your HTML elements. So you follow the same sort of format. We're saying number here, document.query selector. Within this, you pass in the what is your unique identifier. In this case, similar to CSS, we put a dot to identify it as a class with counting num. Right, it is the element with the class of counting num. Now, if this was an ID, I'd put this. And that would give me the ID of counting num. But this will work the exact same. So I come here, click to increase, click to increase, click to increase. Now, please note that query selector does just return the first element. So this gave me a list of elements that had that class. Query selector just gives me the first one. Now, if it's unique enough, so this is the only one with counting num, that works just fine. If you need it to be more unique, then you can identify it this way or give it an additional class name sort of thing. This is a sort of catch-all. Under the hood, query selector is a little bit slower because it's kind of just more generic. It's loosey-goosey, right? This is a little bit faster and allows you to really hone in on what you are trying to do, what you are trying to manipulate, what you are trying to change. Whereas this allows for a little bit more room for error because you're like, yeah, let's do it. And if you forget, just like I did, that I actually named another class counting, then that could mess up, right? So this is definitely more forgiving. But with that, some of the drawbacks is a little bit slower. Now, is it so slow that you'll probably even notice it? No. Now, if you had a ton of them, then maybe, right? But it's fairly negligible from a like slowness side. This, I do like being specific because it allows me to know exactly what I'm doing with my code. And it allows me to make sure that I'm not targeting the wrong thing. But as you can see, this one's a little bit easier to write, a little bit easier to understand out of the gate. So if you were to do either one, both works fine. You could even start with query selector. And then when you get comfortable, move up to this, or maybe you just never do this. And you say, forget it. I'll just always use this. Sounds like a problem for future will, when I'm trying to make my website a little faster. So that is our query selector. It allows us to target an element by using a class or an ID. And then here, I'm just saving that information so I can utilize it in a function that I call on this button here. Okay. 2 minutes under time. So any questions on what we've talked about? How we
Okay,
feel?
so uh, the zero where you put the index 0,
Uh-huh.
can you, if you want, can you would you put 23 up there? If you put 23 up there, would it work in
Here?
the index? Yep. Would it
Remember,
increase the number?
no. So remember, this is an array, right?
Yeah. Okay.
And
Is that
so when I'm dealing with array, this is just our index position, right?
okay? Okay,
So
in that
let's say,
space.
yeah. So let's say that I've got an array of 3 elements. I'll
Yeah.
change the color because it's pink, right? So I've got this array of 1, 2, 3 elements.
Yes.
This is just referring to index position 0. So it's just giving me my first one back.
Yeah. Okay.
And then 1, 2. So if you put 23, if there was 24 elements that had
Yeah.
that, then yeah, it would get to the last one.
Yeah.
But this is just an index position.
Okay. I get it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Also, I'm
So
seeing a lot in the chat. Guys, this is very normal to be like, what did we just, and I'm just over here like casually like, oh yeah, and then you just do this, right? Very normal. It is super duper normal. That's why we give you 2 weeks for the exam, right? It's no expectation. If you guys were like, dude, I'm already ready for the exam, I'm gonna crush it right now, that would be wild. Like you'd be built different. So this is a lot. Take it slow. There is the videos. You'll have access to that. Have access to all of this. Let me come here. Give me just 1 second. Okay. Here, and I'll put this on our thing as well, is all of our code for class. So now all this code that I've got, if you go to this, you'll come here and you can go to week 1. Here's all of our class code for lecture 1, lecture 3. You can go all the way there. Go to week 2, which is today. I even have a solution file. You can come here and everything we just built is right here. So hopefully this helps you guys. That way you have actually the code as well. So that way you can see, okay, here's how we did it. Here's how we built it. So now I'll start moving every class. I'll just make sure I push to GitHub for you guys. So that way this will be persistent. You just need to click there. And then it'll all automatically be there and you'll be able to, every class I'll just push real fast and then so you'll have week 1, 2, 3. And you guys can just have access to this forever. So. Cool. All right. Any other questions? If this was a lot, please do not think that you're alone. Please do not think that you can't do it. This was, just so you guys know, whenever I first learned how to code, this was like my personal hell. I had no idea what I was doing. I knew a little bit of HTML going into it. Like I knew what an H1 was. Because I took like a week course before, did like a Udemy thing. And now I'm here. I'm like, oh yeah. That just means I can guarantee if you just grind. I don't mean grind like wake up at 5 and do it, but like it's going to be hard. Like I wish it wasn't. I wish it was super easy and I could just take the knowledge of Bill Gates and all the smart people and put it in your brain. We can't. And it will have moments of being really tough. And you might do your first exam and be like, I don't know what I'm doing and I should rethink everything. I promise this is a job of persistence. And if you just show up every day and you give an effort, I promise it does get easier. Just hard, but it does get easier. So, okay, that's my soapbox. We'll stop the recording here.